Horror movies have been on the up for a while now, having overcome a lengthy period of tepid remakes, limp originals, and a general lack of creativity. Indeed, while certain projects in the works maintain our hankering for fresh blood, equally as many, if not more, have us cringing with fear, and not in a good way. So with that being said, I'm Jem from WhatCulture.com, and here are upcoming horror movies that are already doomed. Number 8. Nosferatu. Robert Eggers, Bill Skarsgård, Willem Dafoe, and Nicholas Hoult. Where can the upcoming remake of the German expressionist classic Nosferatu go wrong? Well, in spite of this moody new Nosferatu's killer cast, audience anticipation and indie credibility, recent trends at the box office suggest we may be all vamped out. Long gone is the fighty romance heyday of Twilight and True Blood, and despite many attempts to do so, very little in the way of serious or silly vampire flicks have been able to fill the gaping void. In fact, the three last major vampire movies have all seriously underperformed at the box office, despite being well received by critics. Nicolas Cage and Nicholas Hoult starring Renfield took less than half of its budget. Nosferatu-esque The Last Voyage of Dementor did the same, and while this year's blood-sucking ballerina child Abigail has pulled up just north of its budget, marketing and distribution costs make it a clear loss for everybody involved. And do not get us started on Morbius. It doesn't help that these films are released far from Halloween, which, while not a prerequisite, certainly boost appetites for scary visual fare. Nosferatu's festive release date doesn't put it on great footing, and the appetite for vampires on the big screen as a whole suggests it may be better to put this one back in its coffin for a couple of years. Number 7. Speak No Evil. As we know, remaking successful or critically acclaimed movies is rarely a recipe for success, least of all ones that just came out like a week ago. Okay, sure, it's been 2 years since the original Danish version of Speak No Evil was released, but in the world of movie making and movie watching, that might as well be yesterday. This haunting psychological horror tests human boundaries in a way that M. Night Shyamalan's Knock at the Cabin could only dream of, using the lives of Bjorn and Louise, a Danish couple invited to a Dutch couple's country house for a weekend getaway, as the fracture point for the shattering of the social contract. Bjorn and Louise's hosts test the guests' limits, escalating from small passive aggressions to horrendous intrusions of privacy and eventually all-out violence. It's a clever, considerate film, thus Hollywood has decided it needs a remake. James Watkins is at its helm, and while it has star power in the form of James McAvoy, there are few, if any, foreign language horror films that have come out the other side of Hollywood in better shape than they went in, like The Grudge and Let Me In, to name a few. Number 6. The Crow. For some reason, when Hollywood decides to do a remake, it's always a cult classic on the chopping block. Enter Rupert Sanders' The Crow, using the original comics as its source material, but really serving as a reboot and remake of the 1994 film of the same name. The Crow rises from 15 years in development hell to finally land in this era. This is a Crow movie for Gen Z, with all the trappings that brings, from face tattoos and micro fringes to a cloud rap soundtrack. But despite a really good trailer, fans are dead set against it, as it treads on hallowed ground. Original Eric Draven, the titular Crow, Brandon Lee, died during filming in 1993, and this fact, alongside his skilled performance, an iconic soundtrack, and a definitively gothic visual style, helped cement The Crow as a piece of permanent 90s pop culture. If the trailer for the new version is anything to go by, Bill Skarsgård and FKA Twigs simply don't have the chemistry of Lee and co-star Sophia Shinas. Add to this the flat dialogue, the fact that some of the effects looked phoned in, and that it comes from a director with a middling filmography, and prospects are not looking peachy. Number 5. Saw 11. Last year, Saw X took everyone by surprise, including its studio, by its overwhelming popularity with audience and critics, resurrecting the presumed dead franchise in an unexpectedly human fashion for what promised to be the final time. Until it wasn't. Lightning rarely strikes twice when it comes to sequels, prequels, requels, and reboots. And yet Lionsgate are pumping out another entry to order, rumoured to be a direct sequel to the prequel. A C-prequel? Whatever way they take it, neither will be especially welcome from a franchise whose forward trajectory has been non-existent since the early 2010s, and whose nostalgia factor has just about run dry. All goodwill built up by previous movie is set to be squandered by a rushed and unnecessary project that falls back on the dubious talents of director Kevin Gruett, who doesn't exactly have a clean track record. If you put any stock in Rotten Tomatoes or critics' opinions in general, he has only been involved in one good film in his 20-year career as a director and editor, and that was Saw X, despite having helmed, edited or produced every single other franchise entry. Number 4, Blade. Everyone went nuts when we heard about the new Blade, and rightly so, given how long an MCU Blade has been circling the drain of development hell, and how spectacularly the original Blade movies had snuffed themselves out. As things appeared to progress, and Daredevil and Punisher were rumoured to be back in the mainstream fold, it seemed the perfect time to develop a more adult-orientated side of the wider MCU franchise that could pair big-budget aesthetics with a brooding tone and horror action. Well, that was 5 years ago. In the time since, Marvel have been seriously struggling, not knowing how to deal with a drastic post-Endgame flaccidity and suffering production issues that have seen Blade take on a new director and a new writer pretty much every year since the film was announced. As a result, it has failed to begin production for several years, with successive potential release dates rocketing past and a current prospective date of 2025 seeming possible, although not definite. The new date pushes the project into Marvel's Phase 6, meaning there's likely no strong interconnection of the character and any of the existing plot threads. While a standalone film could, in theory, work, the studio won't want to step back from its universe-building endeavours, neither will they be able to go far enough to deliver what audiences want in terms of violence and bloodshed. Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and while you're there, drop us a like, share and subscribe too. Number 3, The Strangers, Chapter 2. The Strangers has never been a tentpole franchise, beginning as it did on a home invasion movie that, while engaging enough, was not exactly built for sequels, something borne out in the second installment. Unfortunately, filmmakers won't let the IP rest, and they're still determined to make The Strangers happen. A big part of The Strangers failing is that, while mysterious and scary, its masked villains have no discernible personality or desires. They just freak people out and kill them. And in this age of horror, that's just not enough. Chapter 1 has naturally gone down in flames, panned by critics and set to make considerably less than the previous film, Strangers Prey at Night, at the box office. And while this would usually be enough to put an end to a proposed 3-film undertaking, the next chapter is still going ahead. But why? Because they filmed the new trilogy all at once. Regardless of what this does to streamline production, it does not spell the height of artistic creativity. One only needs to look as far as The Hobbit and The Matrix for salient examples. Part of the failure of the first one is director Renny Harlin, who isn't known for great filmmaking, having helmed a middling Nightmare on Elm Street, The Worst Exorcist, the second Die Hard, and too many straight-to-video duds to mention. He will be the source of the second film's demise, and all we can do is watch. Or, not. Number 2, Bambi The Reckoning. These days, interconnected universes of movies are as numerous as the dollar-eyed executives commissioning them, and while it can be hard to track which multiverse we're in or who has the golden mitt of ultimate power, most of us have a good sense of what's on offer. But be honest now, who was aware of the twisted childhood universe? With classics such as Winnie the Pooh, Bambi, Pinocchio and Peter Pan coming into public domain, which Disney have been squatting on for decades, the ground is fertile for filmmakers to make a bit of fun. Unfortunately, the filmmakers of the aforementioned TCU came up with the idea: childhood favourites go rogue and do bloody murder, and then called it a day. Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey is god-awful, its sequel is no better, and next on the chopping block is Bambi, who's now feral, mutated, and is set to have his reckoning hunting a mother and son in the woods. The odds of Reckoning, and indeed any subsequent entry in this rushed, low-budget, low-effort franchise, being anything but dismal are slim to none, but will it stop a select few from tuning in? No, it won't. Not me, but no, it won't. And number 1, Scream 7. Scream, scream, scream. Where do we begin? When the meta-slasher franchise pulled itself up by its bootstraps in Scream, the future looked bright, sporting a new cast of characters to carry the torch while still allowing room for some original faces. Its sequel, Scream 6, suffered a blow with the loss of the series' original Scream Queen Neve Campbell over a pay dispute, and yet it soldiered on, carving a new niche in New York City while subverting all the usual tropes. while a 7th film was always planned. Making a trilogy of the new films, things fell apart quickly. Melissa Barrera, one of the picture's 2 leads, was fired for social media posts supporting Palestine. Shortly thereafter, Jenna Ortega, the other lead, quit during a scheduling conflict with her Addams Family adjacent Netflix series Wednesday, and director Christopher Landon jumped ship at the end of last year. In the time since then, original screenwriter Kevin Williamson has signed on to direct number 7, and the production has negotiated Campbell's return, but with half or maybe none of the young cast set to reprise their roles, most of the originals already killed off, and Sidney Prescott's story taken as many places as it can conceivably go, it is tough to see them turning this one into a win.